Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and we've got the early spring garden tips and tour. Early spring here in southeast England, which is approximately a USDA hardiness zone of 9, is early March, but it may be different where you are. So I like to think of it as the time when the first crocuses come up, and perhaps the very earliest daffodils, and the deciduous trees and shrubs, the ones that have lost their leaves in winter. Some of them have just got a few buds appearing, and it's quite a time of shift in the gardening world, so there are some jobs that you actually have to get done now. If you're new here, the Middlesized Garden uploads a video once a week, and if you want to see it when you open up YouTube, then click the subscribe button, which is absolutely free. And if you want YouTube to tell you when a new video has been uploaded, then click the notifications button. So crocuses, well, they really lift our spirits because they're the first flower that comes out, and they're important food for pollinators because on a sunny day bees come out and it gives the bees something to eat. I've always admired lawns which have a swathe of crocuses, so I decided I wanted that for our front lawn. We've actually decided to turn these two patches of grass into a mini meadow this year, although I have a slight suspicion it may just turn into a mini mess, but I will certainly keep you posted. So I planted 150 crocus corms last autumn, and that seemed like a lot to me, particularly as it takes some time to plant them. However, I had in mind a whole swathe of crocuses. In fact, what I got was 1 or 2 crocuses popping up. They have all come up. There are 150 out there. I've had a rough count. But it takes an awful lot of crocuses in a lawn to create an effect of a swathe. These two little patches of grass are about 12 by 15 feet, and 75 crocus corms on each of those has sort of gone nowhere. Next autumn I'll plant double, but also I've chosen crocuses that naturalise. Bulbs that naturalise are bulbs that spread naturally in the lawn, so you don't have to keep on buying or planting bulbs. But you do need to make sure that you don't mow or take away the leaves until they've had the chance to take in all nutrition that they need for the following year. So if you've got crocuses on a lawn, you can't mow that lawn until at least 2 months after the flowers have gone. I think my crocuses would have looked better if I had had actually perhaps just 2 or 3 clumps of 20 or 30 crocuses on each patch of lawn. And that would have had a better effect than just the odd crocus here and there. But there was another reason why there seems to be a rather random planting of crocuses in this lawn, and that is that we have ivy mining bees. These are the last bees to emerge in summer. They emerge in late summer and they whiz frantically around about 2 or 3 inches off the ground for about 6 weeks, and then they disappear back under the ground again, and they live on ivy. People worry that because we have so many of these bees in our front garden that people might get stung walking up the front path, or that they'll come into the front door, but neither of those things has ever happened. Male ivy mining bees don't have a sting, and female ones have a very weak sting which they don't like to use. But obviously if you're doing a wildlife meadow, there's no point in destroying the habitat of the wildlife that's already there. So the ivy mining bees leave a little tiny pile of soil where they've burrowed into the earth, and I tried to plant the crocuses everywhere where there wasn't that little tiny mound. I'm hoping that over the long term the bees and the crocuses can just kind of sort themselves out between them, but until then I'm not going to get that terribly grand display that I was hoping for. We also planted some wildflower seeds in the lawn, and I'm not sure whether these will come up. It's much harder for seeds to come up if you leave the lawn turf on, but because of the ivy mining bees we didn't want to take the lawn turf off, and the lawn turf is quite competition for the wildflowers, so I may have to plant plug plants in this summer, and of course this summer it may all look very scrappy, but I'll definitely show you on videos, so follow me along on the journey. The job you do have to do in the garden in early spring is prune your roses. Last year I visited Hever Castle Gardens, where they have famous rose gardens, and talked to head gardener Neil Miller on how to choose and care for roses, and I'll put that video in the description below. So I asked Neil what about pruning roses in early spring, and he says it's exactly the time that they prune them. Don't leave it any later, because the roses will start to sprout new growth, and roses flower on the growth from this particular year. So if you let the roses grow now and then you prune them in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, you'll be cutting off the branches that will have your flowers, so you won't get so many flowers. Neil himself lives in a town where the weather is much milder and more sheltered, so he prunes his own roses in late winter. And you can prune roses in late winter, and there may be some growth, and then if you get some very bad frosts or some very bad weather, that growth may be killed off, but it's probably fine. As Neil says, roses are very tough plants. It's getting to the end of the window when you can prune deciduous shrubs and trees. And so we got ours pruned this week. If they've got buds on them, it means the sap's rising, and really it's better to prune trees and shrubs when they're dormant, but you should be fine now. There are 3 ways of pruning trees, and I'll just take you through them because it's useful to know them, whether you're pruning them yourself or asking someone else to prune them. Firstly, there's pollarding. We've done this to a lime tree because it got too big and its branches were spreading over the nearby path. We do want it to give us some screening from the path because people otherwise can see into our windows when they're walking down the path, but we don't really need it to be this big and have it spread right over the path. So we've cut the whole crown off it, and this will sprout again in a sort of lollipop shape, very similar to these trees in Jane Beedle's garden, and I'll put more about that. I'll put the video showing Jane's garden in the description below. The next cut is to remove branches, and the advice is to take the branch off quite close to the main trunk of the tree or the larger branch, but just leave this little mound because that's where the healing takes place. It's generally agreed that there's increasing evidence to suggest that wound healing paints are not a good thing on trees and that you don't need them, so I never use them. But if you cut near this mound, then that's where the maximum healing will take place. If you shave the branch off so it's absolutely flush, and there's no trace of it against the larger branch or the trunk, then you will not get the advantage of those healing elements. And if you cut the branch right off across it, halfway down for example, then you'll get a lot of new growth sprouting there. And that will make it a rather ugly shape. The third kind of pruning we did was to thin out, and this is taking out stems right at the base. It makes a tree or shrub a much better and more airy shape, and generally you would take out the stems that are crossing over or going in a direction you don't want, or you would take out the oldest and thickest stems, as you can see here with our Turkish cobnut. It's also time to cut back any ornamental grasses or to thin them out. Ornamental grasses are the ultimate low maintenance plant for the garden because you really do nothing to them all year except for now. And ornamental grasses grow in almost any situation. You can find grasses that cope with wet conditions and dry conditions, and even ones that will cope with wet and dry alternating conditions. And whatever your weather or climate, you can find an ornamental grass for your garden. They don't need deadheading, they usually don't need fertilising, they just grow, and they are fantastic for wildlife. And they do well in pots, so they're a pretty perfect plant really. But at this time of year, it's either a question of cutting them down to the ground or thinning them out and removing some of the dead stems. If you know what kind of ornamental grass you have, you can look up which kind of pruning method you need for them. But if you don't, take a look at them, and if they have completely died, they're completely dead, like this panicum of mine, you cut them right down to the ground in early spring or late winter. If, however, they're evergreen, you'll see some green grasses. And evergreen ornamental grasses often don't really want to be cut right back down to the ground. So comb out or thin out some of the dead grass and take out any broken stems or dead stems. This Stipa tenuissima, or ponytail grass, is a mystery actually, because I've seen experts call it evergreen and I've seen other experts call it deciduous. And if you look at it, you can see that quite a lot of the grass has died and some of it is still alive. So I'm going to be conservative with this, and I'm just going to comb it out with my hands and remove some of the dead growth wherever I can see it. There are more gardening tips in the Garden Tours and Tips playlist at the end of this video, and if you've got any good early spring tips, then do let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like more tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden, then do subscribe to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.